Master Axe stood before the testing chamber and watched his latest creation shatter into dust. The blade had taken 43 days to forge. He had used the finest quantum-folded alloy in 12 star systems. The metal could cut through starship hulls like paper, but under the gravitational stress simulator, it lasted only 17 seconds before breaking apart. The old's 4 hands clenched in frustration. His silver skin darkened with anger. For 300 years, he had mastered every technique known to his people, the Rani. He was the best blade maker on the forge world. Of kings and warlords across the galaxy paid fortunes for his weapons, but this commission was defeating him. The Sovereign Council needed blades for their neutron star mining operations. Normal tools failed within minutes near those collapsed stars. The gravitational forces were too extreme. They needed something that could withstand forces that crushed ordinary matter into powder. Axe had tried everything. Every alloy, every folding technique, every quantum bonding method. Nothing worked. His apprentice, Ra, entered the workshop quietly. She was young by Rani standards, only 70 years old. Her scales were still bright blue, not yet dulled by centuries of forge work. She carried a data tablet and looked nervous. "Master," she said carefully, "the Salvage Guild has sent a message. They found something in the debris field near the 4th moon." Axe waved a hand dismissively. "I have no time for salvage reports. The Council wants results in 30 days. It's a human, Master." The stopped. He turned slowly to look at his apprentice. "A human? That's impossible. The humans died out decades ago. Their colonies all failed." The salvage crews found a colony ship, old model. The systems were still running on emergency power. They found 2 survivors inside. Ra's voice grew more excited. "Master, they're bringing them here. The medical center is preparing chambers now. One of them is a metallurgist." Axe felt a strange curiosity stir in his chest. He had seen human artifacts before. Primitive things, mostly. The humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel before their civilization collapsed. Their metallurgy was simple compared to Rani techniques. They had never discovered quantum folding. Their strongest metals couldn't match even basic Rani alloys. But still, a living human. The species was thought to be extinct. From a scientific perspective, it was remarkable. "Very well," Axe said. "Inform the medical center I will visit when the humans are awake." 3 days later, Axe stood in the medical observation room and watched the human called Young open his eyes for the first time in 247 years. The human was small compared to Rani, standing barely up to Axe's chest. His skin was pale from centuries in sleep. His dark hair was cut short. He looked confused and frightened as the medical staff explained where he was. The other human, Haypark, woke up 6 hours later. She was a materials scientist according to the colony ship's records. The 2 humans clung to each other as they learned the truth. Their colony ship had failed. They had drifted in space for over 2 centuries. Earth had lost contact with all its colony missions. Humanity's expansion into space had collapsed. As far as anyone knew, they were the last humans alive. Axe felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. To wake up and find your entire species gone. To be truly alone in the galaxy. It was a terrible thing. But he also felt curious. These humans had worked with metals. Perhaps they could offer some perspective, even if their techniques were primitive. A week passed. The humans recovered their strength. They learned the Rani language through neural interface education. It was faster than traditional learning but exhausting. Young spent hours each day studying, trying to understand the technology around him. Everything was so far beyond what humans had achieved. When Axe finally invited Young to his workshop, the human accepted immediately. Anything was better than sitting in the medical center, thinking about his dead world and lost species. The forge workshop was enormous. Dozens of stations lined the walls, each one devoted to different aspects of blade making. Quantum folders hummed with power. Molecular glowed with soft blue light. Graviton stabilizers created fields that made metal float in midair. To Young, it looked like magic. Axe showed the human his latest failure, another blade beautifully crafted that had shattered under stress testing. "Every technique I know has failed," the said. "The metal is too brittle. If I make it flexible enough to bend, it loses cutting power. If I make it hard enough to cut, it shatters under stress." Young walked around the testing chamber slowly. He examined the broken pieces of the blade. He asked questions about the quantum folding process. Axe explained patiently, though he doubted the human could understand such advanced concepts. Finally, Young asked, "Have you tried making the metal less perfect?" Axe stared at him. "What do you mean?" "Your quantum folding creates uniform molecular structure, right? Every part of the blade is identical. Same strength, same flexibility, same everything." "Yes, that is the point. Uniformity means reliability." Young picked up a piece of the shattered blade. "But uniformity also means uniform failure. When one part breaks, everything breaks the same way. What if you made a blade where different parts behave differently? Hard edge for cutting, flexible core for absorbing stress." The skin flushed dark blue with irritation. "That is primitive thinking. We abandoned such techniques ago. Controlled inconsistency is inefficient." "But does it work?" Young asked quietly. Axe wanted to dismiss the human's suggestion immediately. The idea of intentionally making inconsistent metal went against everything he had learned, against 3 centuries of master craftsmanship, against the entire philosophy of Ronnie Forgework. But he had also failed 47 times using his advanced techniques. Ra, who had been listening quietly from across the workshop, spoke up. "Master, what if we let the human try, just as an experiment? We could learn about human metallurgy techniques for historical records." Axe looked at his apprentice, then at the human, then at the pile of broken blades representing months of failed work. His pride said no. His desperation said yes. His scientific curiosity tipped the balance. "Very well," he said slowly. "I will give you basic materials. Iron, carbon, a traditional forge. Show me these primitive human techniques. When they fail, perhaps then you will understand why we advanced beyond them." Young nodded. He didn't smile. He understood the challenge in his words, but he also understood something the Rani had forgotten. Sometimes the old ways worked not because they were simple, but because they were based on deep understanding of how materials actually behaved. "I'll need 6 days," Young said, "and I'll need Hayes' help." Axe agreed. He assigned them a corner of his vast workshop and provided the materials they requested. Then he returned to his own work, certain the humans would fail and finally accept that their primitive methods had no place in modern metallurgy. He had no idea that in 6 days, everything he believed about forging would be challenged by a technique older than. Young stood before the simple forge and felt tears in his eyes. After waking up in an alien world filled with technology he couldn't understand, this basic fire and anvil felt like home. It reminded him of his grandfather's workshop back on Earth. The old man had taught him traditional steelmaking before Young went to university to study modern metallurgy. Hay stood beside him, reading through the material specifications on a data tablet. Even the simple iron and carbon they'd been given was than anything humans had used, but the principles would be the same. The laws of physics didn't change just because you were on an alien planet. "Damascus pattern?" Hay asked quietly. They spoke in Korean, enjoying the small comfort of their native language. The Rani couldn't understand them, and it felt good to have something private. "Modified Damascus," Young replied. "But with precise carbon layering, we need to create zones of different hardness. The core needs to be flexible, the edge needs to be hard, and the transitions between them need to be gradual, not sudden." Across the workshop, Axe and Ra watched the humans work. The apprentice was fascinated. She had never seen anyone forge without quantum stabilizers or molecular, just fire, hammer, and timing. Young heated the iron until it glowed orange. Not the precise temperature control of Ronnie Forge's, just watching the color change. When it reached the right shade, he pulled it out and began hammering. The sound echoed through the workshop. Ronnie Forgework was quiet, controlled, almost silent. This was loud and physical. Hay added carbon powder at specific intervals. They had calculated exactly how much carbon each layer needed. Too much and the steel would be brittle. Too little and it would be too soft. They were creating a pattern of high carbon and low carbon layers. "Why are they hitting it so much?" Ra whispered to her master. "Primitive compaction technique," Axe replied. "They're aligning the molecular structure through physical force. We use graviton fields for the same purpose, but with much greater precision." "But they're creating patterns in the metal," Ra observed. "Look at how they fold it. Each fold creates new layers." Axe had noticed. The humans folded the metal back on itself repeatedly. Each fold doubled the number of layers. After 10 folds, there would be over 1,000 layers. After 15 folds, over 30,000. It was crude, but it was also methodical. Days passed. The humans worked in shifts, sleeping only when necessary. The forge never went cold. Other Ronnie craftsmen began visiting the workshop to watch. Word had spread that the extinct species was attempting traditional metallurgy. Some came to mock. Others came from genuine curiosity. Young ignored them all. He focused on the work. Heat, fold, hammer, cool. Heat, fold, hammer, cool. The rhythm was meditative. Each fold was critical. Each heating had to be precise. Too hot and the carbon would burn out. Too cold and the layers wouldn't bond properly. On the 4th day, Hay began the differential heat treatment. This was the crucial step. They coated different parts of the blade with different materials: clay on the spine, bare metal on the edge. Then they heated the entire blade and quenched it in oil. The coating controlled how fast each part cooled. The bare edge cooled quickly, making it hard and sharp. The coated spine cooled slowly, keeping it flexible. It was simple chemistry and physics, but it required perfect timing. The blade warped slightly during quenching. This was normal. Young straightened it carefully while the metal was still warm enough to move but cool enough to hold its shape. More Ronnie gathered to watch. They had never seen anyone manually straighten a blade before. Their quantum forging produced perfectly straight weapons every time. "It looks flawed," one visiting craftsman commented. "It looks beautiful," Ra replied quietly. She could see the wave pattern in the metal where the layers showed through. To Ronnie eyes trained to value uniformity, it looked imperfect. But there was something organic about it, something alive. On the 6th day, Young finished the final polishing. The blade was ready. It wasn't as sharp as Ronnie quantum blades. It wasn't as light. The wave pattern in the steel was visible to the naked eye. By every Ronnie standard, it was inferior. But Young held it up and felt confident. This blade would do something no Ronnie blade had done. It would survive. Axe approached the human's corner of the workshop. A crowd of Ronnie craftsmen followed him. Everyone wanted to see if the primitive technique had produced anything worthwhile. "Your blade is finished?" Axe asked. "Yes, master," Young replied. He used the formal title respectfully. "It's ready for testing." They moved to the testing chamber. Ra operated the controls while everyone watched through the observation window. The human blade was mounted in the gravitational stress simulator, the same test that had destroyed 47 of Axe's blades. Ra activated the simulator. Gravitational force pressed down on the blade. The readings climbed: 10,000 G-forces, 20,000, 30,000. This was where Axe's latest blade had shattered. The human blade bent. The wave pattern in the steel became more visible as the metal flexed under stress. 40,000 G-forces, 50,000. The blade curved like a bow. Ronnie blades didn't bend. They either held their shape perfectly or broke. "It's failing," one craftsman said. "Look at it deform." but Ra was reading the structural integrity sensors. "No," she said slowly. "It's not failing, it's flexing. The molecular bonds are holding. It's redistributing the stress instead of resisting it." 60,000 G-forces. The blade bent almost 40 degrees. Everyone was certain it would snap, but it held. The Damascus pattern showed stress lines, but the layers were sliding microscopically against each other, absorbing the force. 70,000 G-forces. Finally, a small crack appeared near the base, but instead of the catastrophic shattering that Ronnie Blades experienced, the crack stayed small. The layered structure contained it. The force was redistributed to other areas. Ross shut down the simulator. The blade slowly straightened as the pressure released. It was damaged, yes, but it hadn't shattered. It had survived forces that would have destroyed any Ronnie blade. The workshop was silent. Every craftsman stared at the human blade in disbelief. It looked primitive. It looked flawed. It had bent under stress, but it had survived what their advanced alloys could not. Axe moved closer to the observation window. His 4 hands were trembling slightly. "How?" he asked quietly. Young joined him at the window. "Your blades are stronger than mine in every way. Harder, sharper, more precisely made. But they're uniform. Every part has the same properties. When one part fails, everything fails at once." He pointed at the bent human blade. "My blade is weaker, but it's not uniform. The edge is hard for cutting. The core is flexible for absorbing stress. The layers can slide against each other microscopically. When stress builds up, the blade can bend without breaking. It's not about being stronger. It's about knowing how to survive." "Imperfection as advantage," Ross said thoughtfully. "Not imperfection," Hay corrected gently. "Intentional variation. We didn't make mistakes. We designed different parts to behave differently on purpose." Axe was quiet for a long time. 300 years of mastery were being challenged by a technique older than. His pride wanted to reject it. His scientific mind couldn't deny what he'd seen. "Teach me," he said finally. The other craftsmen gasped. Master Axe, the greatest on, was asking to learn from a primitive human technique. "I will teach you," Young said, "but I need something in return. Show me your quantum stabilization. If we combine my technique with yours, we might create something neither of our peoples could make alone." Axe looked at the human for a long moment. Then his skin flushed with the blue color that meant respect among Ronnie. "Agreed. We will learn from each other." For the first time since waking up in this strange future, Young smiled. His species might be gone. His world might be lost. But his knowledge, his craft, his grandfather's teachings, those could live on. That was its own kind of immortality. The news spread across like fire through dry grass. Master Axe, the most respected in 12-star systems, was learning primitive metallurgy from humans. The reaction was immediate and divided. Young craftsmen were excited. They came to Axe's workshop in groups, eager to see the techniques that had made a blade survive impossible stress. They asked questions. They took notes. Some even began experimenting with traditional forging methods in their own workshops. But the older masters were furious. They saw it as an insult to Ronnie honor. Their people had spent developing quantum forging techniques. They had moved beyond primitive hammering and fire. To return to such methods felt like regression, not progress. Hy-Eth was the angriest of all. He arrived at Axe's workshop on the 10th day, surrounded by 6 senior guild members. His silver scales were dark with rage. His 4 arms were crossed in a gesture of severe disapproval. "Axe," his voice boomed through the workshop, "what is this disgrace I hear about?" Axe was at the forge with Young, learning to read metal temperature by color. He looked up calmly at the guild delegation. "Eth, welcome to my workshop." "Do not play diplomatic games with me," Eth snapped. "You are teaching our sacred craft to aliens. Worse, you are learning primitive techniques that we abandoned before their species even achieved. This is an embarrassment to every Ronnie. Ra stepped forward. Master Eth, the human technique produced results. The blade survived stress that destroyed our quantum-forged blades. One blade, Eth dismissed with a wave. A single lucky result does not invalidate of advancement. I have commissioned Master OK to solve the neutron star blade problem using proper Ronnie methods. His solution will be ready in 12 days. Axe set down his hammer carefully, and if his solution also fails. It will not fail, Eth said coldly, because he is using real science, not primitive guesswork. The Guild Council has made a decision, Axe. You will cease this embarrassing experiment immediately. You will send these humans away, and you will submit your workshop for inspection to ensure no inferior techniques have contaminated our craft. The workshop fell silent. Every apprentice and craftsman stopped working to watch the confrontation. This was more than a disagreement about techniques. This was about authority and tradition. Axe's skin flushed dark blue. Among Ronnie, this could mean either respect or defiance. No, he said quietly. Eth blinked all four eyes in shock. What did you say? I said no, I will not stop learning. I will not dismiss my students, and I will not submit to inspection like a failed apprentice. Axe's voice was calm but firm. For 300 years, I have served the guild faithfully. I have trained 47 masters. I have created works that are displayed in royal collections across the galaxy. I have earned the right to pursue knowledge wherever I find it, even if that knowledge comes from an extinct species barely capable of, Eth demanded. Young stepped forward. He spoke carefully in his still imperfect Ronnie. My species failed. This is true. Our colonies died. Our expansion ended. But our failure does not make our knowledge worthless. We learned things in our struggles that you never needed to learn because your technology advanced differently. Hay joined him. You never had to make metal work with limited resources. You moved straight to quantum forging. You skipped the intermediate steps where you learn why materials behave the way they do. We didn't skip those steps. We couldn't afford to. Eth looked at the humans with disgust. The council's decision is final. If you continue this work, Axe, you will face exile from the guild. Your master status will be revoked. Your workshop will be seized. Think carefully before you defy us. The turned and left, his delegation following. The workshop remained silent for a long moment after they departed. Ra looked worried. Master, he means it. The council can exile you. You would lose everything. Axe looked around his workshop. 40 years he had worked here. 300 years he had been part of the guild. But as he looked at the traditional forge where Young had created impossible steel, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Excitement, curiosity, the thrill of discovering something new. Then I will lose everything, he said simply. But I will not stop learning. Ra, if you wish to distance yourself from me, I understand. The council's anger may extend to my apprentices. Ra's scales flushed bright blue. I'm staying, Master. If you're exiled, I'm exiled with you. Over the next 12 days, Axe, Young, Hay, and Ra worked to create a hybrid technique. They combined human pattern welding with Ronnie quantum stabilization. It was delicate work. The quantum fields could destroy the layered structure if applied uniformly, but if applied selectively, they could enhance it. Young would create the Damascus core using traditional folding techniques. Then Axe would use quantum stabilizers on specific areas only. The edge received quantum hardening for cutting power. The spine remained traditionally forged for flexibility. The transition zones were treated with partial stabilization to create gradual chain rather than sharp boundaries. The result was beautiful. The wave pattern of Damascus steel showed clearly in the core, but the edge had the crystalline shimmer of quantum-forged metal. It was a blade that belonged to neither species. It was something new. Hay ran calculations on her data tablet. Theoretically, this should have the cutting power of quantum forging with the stress absorption of traditional steel. but we won't know until we test it. They prepared the testing chamber. Word had spread that Axe was creating a hybrid blade. Craftsmen gathered to watch again. Some came to support him. Others came hopping to see him fail so the guild's authority would be confirmed. The blade was mounted in the gravitational stress simulator. Ra activated it with trembling hands. The force began building. 10,000 G-forces, 20,000. The blade held perfectly straight, not even a millimeter of flex. The quantum-hardened edge was resisting the force just like a pure quantum blade. 30,000 G-forces, 40,000, still no flex. The observers began murmuring. Was this just another rigid blade that would shatter? 50,000 G-forces. The first microscopic bend appeared, but it wasn't the catastrophic curve of the pure Damascus blade. It was controlled, gradual. The transition zones were activating, allowing some flex while maintaining cutting-edge integrity. 60,000, 70,000. The blade bent slightly but maintained its edge sharpness. The Damascus core was absorbing stress while the quantum-hardened edge stayed functional. 80,000 G-forces. This was beyond any previous test. No blade, Ronnie or human, had endured this much stress. A small crack appeared in the monitoring display. Structural failure in 3, 2, the computer announced. But the crack didn't spread. The layered structure contained it. The quantum-stabilized sections redistributed the force. The blade bent further but didn't break. 90,000 G-forces, still holding. The metal was at its absolute limit. Any more would destroy it, but it hadn't failed yet. Ross shut down the simulator. The blade slowly returned to its original shape with only slight permanent deformation. It showed stress marks. It would need reforging eventually, but it had survived forces that shouldn't be possible. The workshop erupted in shocked conversation. The young craftsmen were excited. The older masters looked disturbed. Everything they believed about proper technique had just been challenged. Axe removed the blade from the testing chamber. He examined it carefully with an experienced eye. The edge was still sharp despite the extreme stress. The core showed damage but no catastrophic failure. It was better than either technique alone. "We need to inform the Sovereign Council," Ra said. "They ordered a solution for the neutron star mining. This is it. The guild will claim it's invalid because it uses human techniques," Hay pointed out. Young smiled slightly. "Then let them provide a better solution. Master OK has 2 days left on his commission. Let him show his pure Ronnie blade. We'll see which one the council prefers." Axe nodded. "Agreed. We wait. If the guild's blade succeeds, I will accept their judgment. But if it fails—" He looked at the hybrid blade in his hands. "Then they will have to accept that advancement sometimes means combining knowledge, not rejecting it." The news reached the Sovereign Council that same day. 2 blades would be presented, one pure Ronnie, one hybrid human Ronnie. The council, frustrated by months of delays in their mining operation, ordered a practical test. Both blades would be tested in actual neutron star conditions. The trial was set for 3 days later. The entire guild was watching. The outcome would determine not just which blade was better, but whether the Ronnie would learn from humans or reject their knowledge forever. The mining station orbited neutron star XR 771 at what was considered a safe distance. Even here, thousands of kilometers away from the collapsed star, gravitational forces made instruments behave strangely. Space itself was warped. Light bent at wrong angles. Time passed differently than it did in normal space. Young stood in the observation deck and stared at the neutron star through heavily filtered windows. It was beautiful and terrifying. A star compressed down to a sphere only 20 kilometers across, but containing more mass than Earth's sun. The gravitational pull was so intense that a single teaspoon of neutron star matter would weigh billions of tons. "Scared?" Hay asked quietly in Korean. She stood beside him, also staring at the impossible object. "Terrified," Young admitted. "We're about to test a blade I made with medieval techniques near an object that breaks the laws of physics. If this fails, everything we've done is worthless." "If this fails, we're still right about the technique," Hay corrected. "Maybe the forces here are just too extreme for any blade, even ours." Ra entered the observation deck. Her scales were pale with anxiety. "The test begins in 1 hour. Master Axe is in the control room with the mining engineers. Master OK just arrived with his blade." They made their way to the control room. It was crowded with engineers, council observers, and guild representatives. Master OK stood near the viewing screen, his silver scales polished to a shine. His blade rested in a special case. Even from across the room, Young could see it was beautiful, pure quantum-forged metal that seemed to glow with inner light. Axe's hybrid blade sat in a simple container nearby. It looked rough compared to OK's work. The Damascus pattern in the core made it seem almost organic, primitive. Hy-Eth was also present, along with 3 members of the Sovereign Council. The council members wore official robes marking their authority. They looked impatient and frustrated. The mining operation had been delayed for months. They wanted results, not politics. Council Speaker Hen called the room to order. "Both blades will be tested under identical conditions. Mining drones equipped with each blade will attempt to cut collapsed matter deposits near the neutron star's equator. The operation will continue until either blade fails or 6 hours pass, whichever comes first. Are both ready?" "Ready," OK said confidently. "Ready," Axe said quietly. The mining drones launched from the station. They were heavily shielded and reinforced, but even so, they could only survive near the neutron star for limited periods. The gravitational stress was incredible. Each drone carried 1 blade mounted on its cutting array. The observation screens showed the drones descending toward the neutron star. Space warped around them. The gravitational lensing made everything look distorted. Young felt his stomach clench. He had created that blade with his own hands. Now it was being tested in the most extreme environment possible. The drones reached the cutting zone. Collapsed matter deposits floated in precise orbits. These were chunks of matter so dense that a piece the size of a sugar cube weighed as much as a mountain. They were valuable beyond measure for certain industrial processes, but cutting them required blades that could withstand forces that crushed ordinary matter. OK's blade engaged first. The drone's cutting array activated. The quantum-forged blade sliced into a collapsed matter deposit with perfect precision. The cut was clean, smooth, exactly as designed. Data streamed across the control room screens showing perfect performance. "Beautiful work," Eth said with satisfaction. "This is proper Ronnie craftsmanship." Axe's hybrid blade engaged next. The cutting was rougher, less elegant. The blade generated more heat. The efficiency ratings were lower, but it was working. Minutes passed. Both blades performed their tasks. OK's blade maintained perfect efficiency. The hybrid blade continued its rougher but functional cutting. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. The council observers began to look bored. Both blades seemed to be succeeding. Then, at 17 minutes and 34 seconds, something changed. OK's drone passed through a gravitational eddy. These were common near neutron stars, sudden fluctuations in the gravitational field caused by the star's rotation. The eddy lasted only 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds subjected the blade to forces beyond the test parameters. The quantum-forged blade shattered, not gradually, catastrophically. The molecular bonds that held it together failed simultaneously. The blade exploded into fragments. The feedback cascade destroyed the drone's entire cutting array. The drone itself had to be recalled for repairs. The control room went silent. OK's skin flushed dark with shock and shame. Eth's 4 hands clenched into fists. "Gravitational anomaly," the chief engineer reported. Unpredictable eddy current. Stress exceeded blade tolerances by 40% for 3 seconds. On the other screen, Axe's hybrid blade was still cutting. It had passed through the same gravitational eddy. The blade had bent noticeably. The Damascus core had flexed, but it hadn't broken. As the gravitational stress passed, the blade slowly straightened and continued its work. Council Speaker Hen leaned forward. "Continue the test. Let's see how long it lasts." 1 hour passed. The hybrid blade kept cutting. The efficiency was never perfect. The cuts were never as clean as OK's blade had produced, but it kept working. 2 hours, 3 hours. The blade showed stress. The edge began to dull. The core showed microfractures in the monitoring displays, but it didn't break. At 4 hours and 12 minutes, the hybrid blade encountered another gravitational eddy. This one was stronger than the first. The blade bent almost 60 degrees. Everyone watching thought it would finally snap. Young held his breath. Hay grabbed his hand. The blade held. It bent like a bow under impossible strain. Then, as the eddy passed, it straightened again. Not perfectly. It had permanent deformation now, but it was still functional. 5 hours, 6 hours, the test period ended. The drone was recalled. When the blade was recovered and examined, it was damaged, badly damaged. The edge was dull. The core showed stress fractures throughout. It would need complete reforging. But it hadn't shattered. It had survived 6 hours in an environment that destroyed quantum-forged metal in 17 minutes. The control room remained quiet as the results were compiled. Chief Engineer presented the data to the council. OK's blade showed superior cutting efficiency but catastrophic failure under anomalous stress. Axe's blade showed lower efficiency but continued operation for the full test period despite encountering multiple gravitational anomalies. For sustained mining operations, the hybrid design is clearly superior. Council Speaker Hen looked at both. "Master OK, your blade was beautiful and precise, but it failed when we needed it most. Master Axe, your blade was crude and inefficient, but it survived when nothing else could." She paused. "The Sovereign Council places an order for 200 hybrid blades. We need them within 4 months. Eth stood abruptly. "The Guild Council does not authorize this order. Blades created using primitive techniques cannot be considered true Ronnie work." Hen's scales flushed deep blue with anger. "The Sovereign Council does not need Guild authorization. Our mining operation has been delayed for 6 months while your masters produced beautiful blades that break. We are losing millions of credits every day. If hybrid blades work, we will use hybrid blades. Your approval is not required." "This sets a dangerous precedent," Eth argued. "If we accept primitive techniques, what's next? Should we abandon quantum physics for Newtonian mechanics? Should we give up faster-than-light travel for chemical rockets? Where does this regression end?" Axe finally spoke. His voice was tired but firm. "It's not regression, it's synthesis. We didn't abandon quantum forging. We combined it with traditional techniques to create something neither approach could achieve alone. That's not moving backward. That's moving forward by remembering what we forgot." Ra pulled up a holographic display. "Master, I found something in the archives. Old records from 7,000 years ago, before quantum forging was developed. Our ancestors used layering techniques remarkably similar to human Damascus. We didn't advance beyond these methods. We forgot why they worked and moved to something more impressive but less understanding." Eth stared at the ancient records. His skin color shifted through several emotions: shock, denial, confusion, finally grudging acceptance. "The Guild Council will need to review these findings," he said stiffly. "But the practical results speak for themselves. If the Sovereign Council wishes to use hybrid blades, the Guild will not stand in the way." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't even full acceptance, but it was enough. The formal objection was withdrawn, the order stood. OK approached Axe as the control room emptied. The younger master's scales were dull with shame. "Your technique is superior," he said quietly. "I would like to learn it, if you're willing to teach." Axe placed a hand on Okay's shoulder. "Of course, but you should learn from the source." He gestured to Young and Hay. "These humans discovered something we had forgotten. The honor of teaching belongs to them." Young felt overwhelmed. 2 days ago, he had been the last survivor of a dead species. Now, alien masters were asking to learn from him. His grandfather's techniques, passed down through generations, were being validated on an alien world next to a collapsed star. "I'll teach anyone who wants to learn," he said. "That's what knowledge is for, to be shared." As they left the control room and headed back to, Young looked back at neutron star XR 771. Somewhere in that impossible gravitational hell, a blade made with techniques older than had proven that sometimes survival wasn't about being the strongest or most advanced. Sometimes it was just about knowing how to bend without breaking. 3 months passed. Axe's workshop was no longer a quiet place where a master worked in isolation. It had become something else entirely. A school, a laboratory, a bridge between two civilizations' knowledge. Every day, young Ronnie craftsmen arrived to learn the old techniques. Young taught the basics of traditional forging, how to read temperature by color, how to feel when metal was ready to fold, how to create layers that would work together instead of fighting each other. Hay taught the science behind it, the chemistry of carbon diffusion, the physics of stress distribution, the mathematics of controlled variation. Axe learned alongside his students. 300 years of experience had made him a master, but also made him rigid. Now he was discovering flexibility in more than just metal. He learned that being a master didn't mean knowing everything. It meant being willing to keep learning. Ra had become the bridge between old and new. She understood traditional techniques from working with the humans. She understood quantum forging from her Rani training. She was developing ways to combine them that neither Young nor Axe had imagined. Sometimes, the youngest students saw furthest because they weren't limited by what they'd been taught was impossible. The workshop had expanded to fill 3 buildings. The demand for hybrid blades was overwhelming, not just from the Sovereign Council, but from military forces, mining operations, and private collectors across 12 star systems. Everyone wanted blades that bent instead of breaking. But it was slower work than pure quantum forging. Each blade required patient hammering, careful layering, precise heat treatment, then quantum stabilization applied by hand to specific zones. It couldn't be automated or mass-produced. Each blade was unique. Young stood at his forge, teaching a class of 15 Rani apprentices. He was demonstrating the proper folding technique when a message came through his communicator. Hay's voice was excited. "Young, come to the research lab, now. We found something." He excused himself and hurried across the workshop complex. The research lab was new, built specifically for studying the hybrid techniques. Hay stood before a large display showing spectroscopic analysis of metal samples. "Look at this," she said, pointing at the data. "We've been analyzing why the hybrid blades work so well. It's not just the layering or the selective quantum stabilization. The two techniques are interacting in unexpected ways." Young studied the data. He wasn't a scientist like Hay, but he'd learned enough to understand the basics. The quantum fields are affecting the grain boundaries between layers. Exactly, but not uniformly. The quantum stabilization is creating microzones where the steel behaves almost like a quantum fluid under stress. It flows slightly at the molecular level, redistributing force. We accidentally created a metamaterial that nobody designed. It emerged from combining 2 approaches that shouldn't work together. Ra was also in the lab, running simulations. If we can understand this interaction better, we might be able to enhance it deliberately. Create blades that are even more resilient. Axe entered the lab, followed by an unexpected visitor. Master OK had become a frequent presence in the workshop. His initial shame at losing the competition had transformed into genuine curiosity. He had been working on mathematical models of stress distribution in hybrid materials. The quantum fluid effect could explain something else, OK said. We've been getting reports from the neutron star mining operation. The hybrid blades are lasting longer than our calculations predicted. They should wear out and need reforging every 3 weeks. But some are going 5 weeks, even 6 weeks. They're getting more resilient with use. Impossible, Axe said reflexively. Then he paused and smiled. Although I've been learning that impossible is not a very useful word. Hay pulled up more data. It's not impossible. The repeated stress is training the metal. The microfluid zones are finding optimal configurations through use. The blade is adapting. Young felt wonder wash over him. Adaptive metal. They had created something that learned, not consciously but through the interaction of quantum fields and layered steel structure. It was beyond anything his grandfather could have imagined when teaching traditional techniques, but it was built on those traditional techniques. A chime announced another visitor. Everyone looked up as High Eth entered the lab. The old looked uncomfortable. His scales were neutral, showing no particular emotion. Master Axe, Eth said formally, I have come with a message from the Guild Council. Everyone tensed. Despite the success of the hybrid blades, the Guild had never fully accepted them. Eth had withdrawn his formal objection, but he hadn't embraced the new techniques either. The Council has spent 3 months reviewing the historical records that Apprentice Ra discovered, Eth continued. Records of our ancestors' techniques before quantum forging. We also studied the performance data from the neutron star mining operation and military testing. He paused, his 4 hands clasped in a formal gesture. The Guild Council officially recognizes hybrid metallurgy as a valid Rani craft. Master Axe, you are hereby appointed as Grand Master of Hybrid Techniques, the first new Grand Master position created in 400 years. Axe's scales flushed with shock. I don't know what to say. Furthermore, Eth continued, still formal, the humans Young and Haypark are granted the title of Honorary Masters of the Forge Guild. They are the first non-Rani to receive this honor. Their knowledge has proven valuable to our people. Young and Hay looked at each other in amazement. Honorary Masters. In a culture that valued metallurgy above almost everything else, this was recognition beyond what they could have imagined. Eth's formal posture relaxed slightly. I was wrong, he said, and the words clearly cost him something. I believed that advancement only moved forward, that returning to old techniques was regression. But you have shown that true mastery requires understanding the foundations, not just building higher structures. The humans reminded us of something we had forgotten. What did we remind you of? Young asked quietly. That knowledge is not owned by any one species or any one era, Eth replied. That wisdom can survive the death of civilizations. That techniques developed on a distant world by people now gone can still teach us something vital. He paused. Humanity may have failed to establish colonies, but humanity's ideas succeeded. That is a legacy worth more than any empire. Later that evening, after the formal ceremonies were complete, Young and Axe worked together at the forge. It had become their habit. The 300-year-old alien master and the 247-year-old human engineer, heating steel side by side. Do you miss Earth? Axe asked as they worked. Young considered the question. Every day I miss the sky, I miss the oceans, I miss knowing that billions of humans were living their lives carrying on the species. He folded the hot metal carefully. But I've found something here, purpose. My grandfather taught me these techniques because he believed they mattered, that the old ways held wisdom. He died thinking the world had moved past such things, but he was right. The techniques did matter, just not in the way either of us expected. Your grandfather would be proud, Axe said. I think so. He used to say that steel had memory. that every hammer blow taught it something. I thought it was just poetry, but maybe he understood something that took me 200 years and an alien world to learn. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Ra was across the workshop, teaching a class in quantum stabilization. Hay was in the lab, analyzing more samples. The workshop hummed with activity, languages mixed. Human techniques blended with Ronnie science. A young Ronnie apprentice approached nervously. "Honorary Master Young, I'm having trouble with the seventh fold. The layers aren't bonding correctly." Young set down his hammer and went to help the student. He showed the apprentice how to adjust the temperature, how to strike at the correct angle. Simple things, basic things. The apprentice's scales brightened with understanding. Axe watched and felt something unfamiliar. Hope maybe, or faith. For centuries he had created beauty, perfect blades that belonged in museums, but they were fragile perfection. Now he was creating something else. Blades that survived, techniques that adapted, knowledge that spread. "Axe," Hay called from the lab entrance. "We're getting a signal. A survey ship found another derelict colony vessel in the outer system. They're checking for pods now." Everyone stopped working. Another possible human survivor. Young felt his heart race. He and Hay might not be the last humans after all. There might be others, a mechanic, a farmer, a teacher, anyone. The message came through an hour later. 3 pods were found intact. All 3 showed life signs. The survivors would arrive in 6 days. That night, Young stood outside the workshop and looked up at the alien stars. Constellations he didn't recognize. Moons that weren't Earth's moon. A sky that would never be home. But as he turned back toward the workshop, hearing the ring of hammers and the hum of quantum stabilizers, the voices of Ronnie apprentices learning traditional techniques and human teachers explaining ancient wisdom, he realized something. Home wasn't a place anymore. Home was knowledge continuing, ideas surviving, techniques passing from one generation to the next, one species to the next, his grandfather's wisdom living on in alien hands. Humanity might be scattered, their colonies might have failed, their expansion might have ended, but their knowledge was spreading across 12 star systems. Their techniques were being taught to species that would outlive them. That was immortality, not living forever but teaching something that would. Axe appeared beside him, looking up at the same stars. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that steel isn't the only thing that knows how to bend without breaking," Young replied. "Humanity bent. We almost broke, but the important parts survived. Maybe that's enough." "More than enough," Axe said. "Come, we have work to do. 3 more humans will arrive soon. They'll need to understand their situation, to know they're not just survivors but teachers, that their species may be gone but their legacy is just beginning." They walked back into the workshop together. The forges burned bright. The quantum stabilizers hummed. And in the heart of an alien world, ancient human wisdom and advanced Ronnie science created something neither species could have made alone. Impossible steel, steel that bent, steel that survived, steel that remembered. And in remembering, steel that taught 2 civilizations that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from resisting everything, but from knowing when to flex, when to bend, and how to keep working long after perfection has shattered into dust.